Hi, Clara here. The following episode is a recording from a recent live masterclass Elle and I hosted called Finding Clarity Through the Enneagram. In it, Elle shares why you can let go of finding your purpose, what growth looks like for each Enneagram type, and the reason so many of us feel unclear in the first place. This was inspiring, so keep listening.
So for those of you that don't know me, I am, my background started as an actress, performer, singer, dancer. And then I did that career. And then when children came along, it was a commitment for me to be a present as much as I could, stay at home mom while they were little. And especially in the theater, you sort of have to pick one or the other because being pregnant and being on stage, it goes, but doesn't go well, especially when you have 3 kids that come along. So I chose to be home. But then because I have this entrepreneurial sort of like spirit that's been born and bred within me, I built my husband's career. He was first a mime. We met on a cruise ship. So first a mime, he moved from Los Angeles to Ohio, and we had to figure out how do we sell a mime in Ohio. And we did it. And then he transitioned to a professional speaker. So I always think it's kind of an interesting story. He got paid not to speak, and now he gets paid to speak. So that was sort of what I did when I was raising kids, is I helped build that business, build his thought leadership platform. So I am really, really fascinated about helping with expand people's influence. And how that is sort of shown up is, sure, if you are a thought leader and you want to create a book or do a blog or a podcast, I help with sort of like that technical side of how to expand your platform. But what I discovered is that when I was working with women, it really boiled down to confidence. It boiled down to clarity. It boiled down to they were struggling with visibility and vulnerability. And so it became more of an inside outside job rather than just how do we make these things happen to expand your platform? It's like, how do you own it? How do you embody it? And then over the years, I discovered the Enneagram, and I just found the Enneagram to be this fascinating system with these 9 unique approaches to life that allowed the work that I did with people to deepen. And it gave sort of a tool and a resource, not just to understand yourself, but to really grow and to transform. And I've said this before in past masterclasses that I love the personality assessments. I love knowing, who I am and how I work and what strengths I have. But what I found stopped short in those assessments was really knowing what to do with the information. Okay, so I have these tendencies, I have these patterns, but how do I change and grow and become a better version of myself? And so the Enneagram, because it has this sort of cognitive, emotional side, it has this spiritual side, as well as a somatic side. And the somatic side is like, how does it show up in our bodies? And how do we carry our emotions, and how do our thoughts process that sort of can get stuck in our body, or our body can teach us, our body can shed light on sort of those areas of growth. And so when I talk about clarity, it's the way the Enneagram is integrated into those 3 aspects of who we are that give us clues into what to do next, what do we want, how to answer that question. So one of the things I discovered, we did a little poll and some of you answered sort of what is your level of awareness of the Enneagram. And in my past master classes, the awareness of the Enneagram was pretty low. I think people were curious to learn about the 9 types, to learn about, you hear things like wings and arrows and centers of intelligence, and it can seem very complex from the outside. So there was a lot of interest to just sort of like understand what is the Enneagram. And this group seems to be much more aware of their type and how the system works. So I think I see 6 of us on camera here. So I would love to know, just raise your hand. Of those who are here, how many of you answered that you're pretty clear of your type? You know your type. So we have one that maybe doesn't. Is DR, is that your, what's your name? Oh, Denise. Hi, Denise. I know Denise. So Denise, you're not so familiar with the Enneagram. You're just kind of learning. If you want to unmute, or you could just nod your head. Yeah. Yeah, not sure. Okay. So part of the presentation today will be a quick overview of the Enneagram. But for Denise, something that you should know is I'm in the final stages. I have several certifications. I took advantage of the COVID pause to do some online learning and development for myself. So I'm certified through the Enneagram in business for training, for individual professional coaching, team development. And the thing that I'm in the final stages of now is a certification through the narrative Enneagram. And the narrative Enneagram is really more about, how do I apply this to live my best life? So it, of course, incorporates professional, but it really is more about that personal, that, sort of that, I don't know. I think I hear often from people too that there are patterns and resistances and blind spots that we have that they've become so ingrained, we're not even aware of them. And so we're responding to things, we're reacting to things the same way we've done it over and over and over. And I often hear people say, I don't know what else to do. I feel like I've tried everything. I keep hitting the same roadblocks. So again, this is where the Enneagram steps up to really shed light and provide those paths to growth and change. But the narrative Enneagram is the certification that I'm finishing. And I share that because one of the things I need to do is a number of Enneagram typing interviews. So Denise, for someone like you who doesn't know your type, you can log on. We'll put it in an email following up, where you can sign up for a typing interview with me. It's free. It's helping me complete my certification, but also it can shed light to help you hone in on your type. Typing is a discovery. I always say the assessments are 65% accurate. They're not completely accurate, and people are often mistyped. So the discovery of the Enneagram type is also part of the beauty of the Enneagram. Nobody's going to tell you, or you're not going to fill out, an assessment that gives you, colors or numbers, or it's really a discovery that deepens your awareness of the Enneagram at the same time you're deepening your awareness of yourself. And I'm pretty passionate about that because I was mistyped, and I've told this story too. I was mistyped. And it's very challenging when you're not, as you're discovering your type, you sort of try on different hats, I'd say, different, perspectives. And then when you find your home base, it just feels like, okay, I've landed. And then all the other pieces can support you in that next step. So I do encourage you to do that. So when I talk about the Enneagram and your next step toward clarity, I've spent a lot of time thinking about what is clarity and why are people so confused? And I'm speaking for myself. I went years doing what I thought was the right thing, doing what I thought I should do, being high achieving, doing the right thing. And then I really sort of realized I don't really enjoy what I'm doing. I'm doing it. I'm feeling resentful. But then the hard part came with, what do I want? What do I need? Where am I driven to follow my passion and my purpose? So I think clarity is about knowing what to do. It's about knowing how you feel. And so much of that becomes covered, especially as women, by the roles we feel we're supposed to be living according to, We naturally are givers, nurturers, so we become over responsible. So we're thinking of others' needs before our own, especially if you have children, or especially if you're in a team and you manage other people. So it's not just about what to do, what I want. It's also, how do I feel? And then there's the next step is then a confidence in knowing what to do, or a confidence in knowing that what we feel is okay. Because I often hear people say, well, I know what I love. I know what I want to do. But then there's a lot of second guessing. Like, am I supposed to want that? There's guilt that comes in. It doesn't feel like this is the path that I've been programmed to be on, or maybe other expectations, other people's expectations. So we have a lot of second guessing. We have a lot of the lack of confidence around our clarity. And then there becomes the trust, the trusting that inner knowing, trusting, even if we start to feel like, I know I want this, but then the trust to act. And then we can get into the whole other conversation of like, then the resistance is when you take action that stop you or set you back. That is a lot of where that's sort of what I do when I coach, is I help people get the clarity, but then really it's about, okay, how do we move through the resistances, the stumbling blocks, the self-doubt that continues to sabotage or throw us off? Also, I think a lack of clarity, if you have sort of like this overall sense of lack of clarity, I often hear people say, I don't know. I don't know. They repeat, I just don't know. I don't know. I don't know what to do. I don't know what I want. And that creates this like uneasiness. And there's this like, it's like a being out of touch with yourself. It's like a distrust in yourself. So it almost like it creates a perpetual lack of certainty. And that feeling of never feeling settled, never feeling certain, then that creates the overwhelm or the anxiety or the frustration or sometimes the sadness. So I guess the next question is, okay, so then how do I find clarity, and how can the Enneagram help me to do that? So it starts with, and I guess the other thing I'd like to interject in there is that I feel like, and not just from what I feel, I've heard this over and over and over. We put so much pressure on ourselves to find our purpose. I want to know my purpose. I want to know my calling. And we say that singularly. It's a purpose. Well, what if we took some of the pressure off and we had purposes? We had a purpose to be an artist. Doesn't mean we have to quit our job and open up an art studio or start making things. What if we had a purpose to save the environment? Doesn't mean we have to move to the coast and start picking trash at the beach. What if we had a purpose to mentor or help the homeless? Or I think the pressure for it to be this all or nothing sets us up for that frustration. So just food for thought. Because it's something that I hear over and over and over, is that there's this disconnect that their job isn't filling the needs of their passion or their purpose. So there's a little bit of changing the paradigm as to what we're expecting of our purpose. I think we do this with our marriages too. We expect our partner to be everything, our best friend, our soulmate, our lover, and that's a lot of pressure to put on one person, one relationship. I think we do that with ourselves, with our life's calling and purpose, which I would like to say purposes. Just to stop for a minute, does that resonate with you? Does that connect? Do you feel that there's a pressure put on? Yeah. There's that do all, be all, and it has to feel amazing all the time. And it starts with getting connected with, what do you love? What do you need? What do you want? Yeah. The other part of the equation that I feel comes in is that I love about the Enneagram is that the Enneagram connects us to like our center of intelligence. And for those of you who are familiar, the Enneagram is 9 types on this geometric symbol. Each type has sort of like a dominant personality sort of theme. And I'll pull up some slides and we'll kind of do a quick zip around the Enneagram circle. But it's organized in 3 centers of intelligence. So there's the head type, the heart type, and the gut type. And why I think this is so important for clarity is that our body has this intelligence that we are often disconnected from. And not everyone, but we tend to think, we're thinkers. We might have a gut reaction or a heart response, but it goes to our head. We all do think. I think when we're trying to figure out what we want, the ego is just loud and strong. Like, what's the right thing, or what's the good thing, or what's the practical thing, or rather than allowing ourselves to really expand beyond the ego. And the Enneagram is also a tool that allows us to do that. Before we go any further, before I kind of zip into the specifics of the Enneagram, are there any questions that come up just from this big picture sort of start? I do have a quick question for those of you that are here. How many of you would say that clarity is important because of being in a transition? How many of you feel like you're in a transition or want to go into a transition? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. For me, I didn't even know I needed a transition. I was just dealing with that sadness and the frustration, sort of like that, the lack of clarity that was causing the uncertainty. So it doesn't have to be that you are intentionally moving through transition or approaching one. So going back to my question, the question was, I talked about clarity often comes up in transition because it's like, what do I do next? Or it's my priorities are changing because I'm finished raising kids, or I'm finishing a job, I'm at a retirement, or it's time of retirement, or, like in Clara's sake, when she was moving from college to career. So I guess my question is, we had a few hands about transition, but then I asked, what was the other interest or desire for clarity that led you to join this conversation today? Is there anyone else that wants to chime in about that? Dave?
Yeah, anyone else? Well, for me, the Enneagram's really mysterious for me because I feel like it gives me more clarity about other people than it does about myself. So I am still not completely sure of what my type is, even though I've read like 5 books about it and listened to I don't know how many podcast episodes, but I've never actually engaged with a direct live expert. It's all kind of self-taught. And I think that might be what's missing for me. So I guess this is just like the next step on my journey. And then I saw your content on Instagram, and I just thought, okay, this is someone that knows what she's talking about. And there was some, stuff about your practices that I really resonated with.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else want to chime in before we go forward?
I do. So I'm just trying to figure out what I'm going to do next in life. I'm a mom and a new approaching senior in high school kid. So my needs won't quite be there, or he won't need me as much. So clarity and going back to work, and what is that work and things like that, and what are my needs.
Yeah.
So
I completely understand and relate to that. And I speak to many people about that. Because it's like the openness of it is terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. Yeah. And the pressure that comes through trying to figure it out. Sometimes it comes up. So yeah. Anyone else want to chime in on that?
So I was wanting to join. I don't know if I'm like in a period of transition, but I just feel a little kind of lost, or like trying to figure out what I really want, going forward.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 kids in college and then a 10-year-old. So different kind of stages, but, my 10-year-old's getting a little more independent, and we just moved actually. So she'll be going to a new school. So I guess it is a bit of transition. But just trying to figure out what I want, what do I want to do, that kind of thing.
And are you aware of your Enneagram type? Have you discovered what it is?
So I'm a 5. I was mistyped as a 9. So I guess to a lot of people, I show up as a 9. But my main key driver is that is the fear of not being competent. And so, finally having been, kind of typed as a 5, or I typed myself as a 5, it feels much more, it resonates much better than the 9 did. But I thought I was a 9 for quite a few years.
Yeah. And that's key for those of you who aren't sure of your type. And I know I spoke to Jen yesterday. And she is also kind of in the same place as you, Dave, where there's been so much exploration with the Enneagram that it almost becomes confusing. Like it's almost like I relate to all of them. But I think, and is it Helen? Is it Helen that just spoke? No, Helen.
Sorry, it was Kara.
Kara. Okay. So Helen is hiding. That's okay, Helen. We still love you. So Kara, what Kara said was that there was like the core resonation for her was that not wanting to appear or feel incompetent. And I think when you understanding the Enneagram is about why am I doing something? What is my motivation versus how am I behaving? And that does often take a person to help sort of like pull that out. It's like I use the example of I was mistyped as a 1 and I'm a 4, and they both have that line of criticality. If that's the right word. Is that a word, Molly Milligan? Criticality. But a 1 is going to see what is wrong, and a 4 is going to see what is missing. And so for me, that was a key piece of understanding that I'm not a 1, I'm a 4. And then like you said, all the other parts of the 4 fell into place for me. So if you're confused or if you're not sure, I mentioned, I don't know if Dave, if you were on yet, but I'm finishing a certification, and part of it is I have to do a certain number of typing interviews, and they're free right now. So, and usually a typing interview, I know, woohoo! Usually a typing interview is, by a fully certified person is $250, $250 an hour. So I would say take that opportunity, because it helps me and can help you. And even with Jen, Jen and I are going to circle back because we didn't kind of hone in as deeply as we needed to. But yeah, that's a key piece to how does the Enneagram become that tool, is you got to land on your type. You got to figure that type, but also know that is a process, and don't feel pressured to figure that out, because in the exploration, you'll continue to learn who you are. So the other interesting thing about clarity is that I feel like clarity it's about authenticity, right? It's about being fully transparent with who we are. There's like, if you look at the definition of clarity, you think of clarity as that purity, transparency. But I think about how that applies to our lives. We want to live authentically. We want to live according to our values. We want to live aligned with our purposes. And so, especially when we're in a second phase of transition, I think we're early in our life, it's kind of clear there's a path laid out according to our, social construct or whatever. And I think we're opening up more and more to having that choice. What do I want? And it can feel like there's a lot of pressure to it. So I'm just encouraging you to relax into the process. And again, as the Enneagram is a discovery of your type, so is sort of that next step, that path. And one of the things, and I'll jump into specifics of the Enneagram, but one of the things that I often encourage people, it is one of the ways I coach. So the process of discerning that next step and taking steps toward it. But one of the tools that I offer as a resource is something I call dabbling, where having a both and mindset, like I don't have to make a choice and this is it. It's not either or. I can try something and not know yet. I can move in a direction and not commit yet. I can dabble with art. I can dabble with, volunteering with an organization I might want to be a part of or an area that I'm interested in. So it's also taking the pressure off for it to be an all or nothing decision as well. So what I'd love to do, if technology serves us, I'm going to share my screen. Actually, you know what I'm going to do before this? I think we have time because we're all here. And I'm going to ask one of the key aspects of what I believe is valuable with the Enneagram is cultivating that inner observer, because we're going to why we're doing things and what's motivating behind what we do, cultivating the inner observer. And when I say inner observer, I mean that still small voice within us, that part of us that turns in and notices, how do I feel? What's my body doing right now? So that we can be in the present and be fully aware and we're not just reacting. So what I'd like to do, if you're with me, is I would like to do a little grounding exercise, and then we're going to go into the Enneagram. So if you could just sort of settle, kind of seat yourself in your chair comfortably with your feet on the floor. And we're just going to take a minute or two to do this. And I do encourage you to close your eyes. My eyes are closed too. So we're all sort of turning that focus inward. And when we close our eyes, we naturally go inside. And the first place to focus is, again, feeling your feet. If you can set them flat on the ground, settling into your seat. If you have to wiggle to sort of like allow yourself to land. And then we're just going to simply take 3 deep breaths. And I encourage you, if it feels comfortable, to put one hand on your gut, your belly, and put one hand on your heart. And just on your own time, we're going to take 3 breaths in. I encourage you to take in through your nose and out through your nose if you can. And just follow the breath in and follow the breath out. And one last breath. And you can just let your hands go back down. And slowly, when you're ready, open your eyes. And I know that was like the Speedy Gonzalez, version of meditation or mindfulness. But I do that more as a reminder to stop, pause, notice. Often when we're unclear, there is a lack of being in touch with that sort of like deep knowing. And so it starts with the stillness, with the stopping, going inward. And some, it could be prayer, some it could be meditation. For some, it's breathing. Others, it could be yoga, like a more of a yin restorative yoga. But that is a key part of accessing that inner clarity, that inner wisdom, because ultimately, no one can tell you. No one can tell you. It comes from you. It comes from your connection. And, again, I say the Enneagram has a spiritual component. There's, spirituality is the belief that there's something greater than you, whether you call that God or Buddha or the universe or source, but connecting into that greater than you. And the Enneagram with the centers of intelligence, whether you're a head type, heart type, body type, sometimes that guidance comes through the body, whether it's through, some people hear a word, some people have a feeling, some people have a temperature change. So really practicing that slowing down and awareness of that. So I wanted to start with that. And I'm going to do that quick little circle around the Enneagram. And what I'm going to share is, for those of you that are new to it, sort of what is the type, but then I'm going to talk about the area of growth, like sort of where you can, as you're working toward answering that question for yourself. But you can see it's a geometric symbol starting with, I'm going to start with 1, and I'm going to do this pretty quick because this is easy stuff you can find on the internet. But 1 is the reformer, the perfectionist. Their primary motivation is to reform and improve. Their challenge is that they can have this relentless inner critic. They are, they desire to do the right thing. So when it comes to clarity, their biggest growth point is believing that they are perfect, they are good enough, they are worthy, regardless of whether they are right or wrong. A 1 can often worry about getting it right. They can be procrastinators in decision making. They can be focusing on too much detail. They can be too rigid, and that blocks them from expanding into what could be next for them. They often, a 1 could also be more playful, be more open, be more letting the small stuff go, being okay with good enough. I would say the biggest challenge for a 1 is that fear of getting something wrong. And a clue for them is when there's resentment and they might have this anger or resentment, that's their clue. That's their clue for what might be suppressed as a need and a want. So if I were coaching a 1, I'd say, okay, you need to cultivate that inner practice, but also become more aware of when you're noticing things are wrong. Become more aware of when you're getting resentment and start to be curious about where that's coming from. Those are the clues to uncovering what's unclear. All right, a 2. So the 2 is the helper. They are the giver. Their primary motivation is meeting the needs of others. Their challenge is that they can be a little prideful about how helpful and how much they're needed, and they can then repress their own needs. So this is huge for seeking that next step, that clarity. A 2 needs to allow themselves to let go of others' needs, that they are worthy regardless of what they give and how much they're needed. And they need to put their focus on, what do I need? What does a 2 need? It shows up for them Often they get stuck in feeling guilty. They can have difficulty in receiving from others. Their clarity comes from asking who the real me is and what are my wants and needs. And a 2 feels very self-indulgent and guilty to do that, but it is a deliberate, intentional practice to sit with that. What do I need? What do I want? And again, that's part of a process that I help people go through, but you can just ask that question, what do I need in this situation before you jump to helping others? 3 is the performer, the achiever. Their primary motivation is recognition, success, often image, how they appear. They want to appear successful. They want to appear. That's why recognition is important. Their challenge is that they go into action instead of being with what really is. Their growth area is that love comes from who they are, not what they do. And a 3 needs to ask themselves what really matters, because their ego is going to tell them that getting something done, accomplishing the task, crossing the finish line, the recognition, the success is what matters. But if they stop and they really check in, they need to practice looking inward for what is a good question for a 3 is, what is my own identity apart from success, apart from expectations? A 4 is the romantic, the individualist. Their primary motivation is they long for what is missing. It's like they never, ever arrive. They never, ever get there. And their challenge is comparison. They want to be special. It's like they see what others have, not as a like, I'm jealous of that person, but like, I want what they have, like something that's unattainable. So their area of growth is to focus on what's right rather than what's missing, to realize that they are complete, they are whole, they are loved, they are not lacking anything. And that, there's an appreciation of the ordinary that a 4 can cultivate. Also consistency. As a 4, I can share that I have to avoid, and I'm kind of embarrassed to say this, and I didn't even realize I was this way, that I have to avoid being over self-absorbed. I can take things really personally. I tend to be overly dramatic, and it sabotages me. It's not all about me. and I am okay just the way I am, even if I don't, I can have a growth mind, a self-development mindset, but I'm okay in the process that I'm in right now, that patience with the process. A 5, I know we said we have a 5 here. The 5, their primary motivation, you said to appear competent. Also, it's to protect their energy, to protect their resources. They can be very withholding, very detached. They desire the acquiring of knowledge. That is where they find their worth, is in competency. And for them, their growth is to realize that there are plenty of resources, that there's plenty of knowledge. And also for a 5, it's to allow themselves to experience feelings, because they often detach emotion over intellect. They can be analytical versus emotional. So growth for them could be to allow themselves to experience emotions, practice not needing to know, which I think would be very good, Kara, from what you said, that it's okay to not know everything. Also, the ability to take action and realize that through action, they're still going to have ample energy and ample support, because oftentimes they'll withhold action for fear of depleting resources. Also, a 5 can isolate themselves. So I think there's something there about, putting yourself out there is a practice for a 5. 6 is the questioner, the loyalist. Their primary motivation is to avoid harm, to be safe. They can be suspicious, pessimistic, fearful. Their growth area is to realize that it is natural to have faith and trust, that they're safe if they let go a little bit, and to reclaim faith and trust in themselves. A growth area for a 6 is to accept uncertainty, especially if you feel like you're unclear of the future, to accept that that's part of the process, to recognize that staying busy is a way to reduce it. Staying busy reduces their awareness to anxiety. And these core emotions, that there's fear, anger, and anxiety or worry, that those are often the best clues to where we can move into for growth. What is causing anxiety? What is causing worry? Be curious about that. And how can I reduce that anxiety and sort of like tune into more trust, which is a process for sure. There's also keep checking in on, am I worst case scenario thinking, and then moving forward despite fear. A 7 is the enthusiast, the adventurer. Their primary motivation is to be stimulated, to feel pleasure. They don't want to avoid pain. They don't want to avoid the deeper feelings. For a 7 sees so many possibilities, so many ideas of what they could do next, of what the right thing is, or clarity, but it's really more, it's too many ideas. The growth for a 7 is to be present, to slow down, to check in, to notice their quest for fun, notice their quest for pleasure, and also their sort of tendency to avoid pain and the hard. So then the 8 is the challenger, the protector. They want to protect themselves. They want to protect others. They can be known as excessive, dominating, impulsive. So their growth area is to recognize that we are all inherently innocent or unbiased. And I say that because they want to, they often, this is an unhealthy 8. They often won't give the benefit of the doubt. They're going to like challenge and sort of like question, and they want to debate something, and they also want control. So then they might, out of the need to control, they often miss the present. I think the growth for the 8 is to practice waiting and listening, to be aware of an appropriate amount of force. Again, that excessiveness, that refusal to be controlled. There's a little bit of a letting go that an 8 can do, to surrender into sort of understanding what the next best thing is. And then the 9 is the peacemaker, the mediator. Their goal is to avoid conflict, to keep peace. Their challenge, especially when it comes to that clarity, emotional clarity, next step clarity, they are very self-forgetting. They can be very ambivalent. Others' priorities come to the forefront. So their growth area is to recognize that their desires, their needs, their opinions are equally loved, accepted, and appreciated. That, and I guess for them, paying attention to their own needs and their well-being. And a 9 wants to avoid conflict. So anger is a very valuable tool for them to really connect into, okay, where am I experiencing anger or resistance? Because this can be the signal to where they are discounting themselves, where something is inside that they're not allowing to matter. So being aware of those feelings and how they may be blocking out their real priorities. And I think also for a 9, they can get caught up in the busyness of mundane tasks as a way to avoid discomfort or conflict. And when we talk about a next step, we talk about clarity, it often comes with discomfort. It often comes with fear. It often comes with stepping out of the comfort zone, And so that is more prevalent for a 9 probably than other types. There's also a sense of feeling they don't deserve what they feel is right for them. So being aware of that tendency as well. So I'm going to unshare my screen. I'm going to go back to everybody. I know that was really fast. And I know that was, I'm assuming a lot of you already know the Enneagram, but really honing in on what are the tendencies of the type and how are those holding you back from moving forward with clarity. So it starts with the type awareness. It goes to the checking in, being curious, that pausing, noticing, allowing, and then asking those core questions for each type. What am I avoiding? What am I fearing? Why am I angry? Because those are the clues. Also, when we talk, I'm just going to say this quickly because I want to leave a few minutes for questions. When we talk about any sort of transition, any sort of change, because if you're interested in clarity, it's because you're not sure of what is ahead or what you should do or who you are or what you want, all that. Any form of change, sorry to tell you, requires getting uncomfortable. It requires pushing through what we are sort of naturally avoiding. So whether that's fear, whether that's vulnerability, whether that's conflict, whether that's looking stupid, whatever that is, I think honing into, based in your type as a clue, what is my greatest fear? What is stopping me? That is a clue to then open up, okay, now what do I want? Because I think it's important to realize, do I know what I want? And I'm just not allowing myself to move past what is holding me back, the resistance of my type, or do I really not know what I want? Those are two totally different questions. Clara, do you have any questions in the chat? That is sort of like where I end with the teaching part, and then I love to move into questions. I am going to do, because of the time, work commitment. That's okay, Dave. What I'm going to tell you really quickly is that sign up for an Enneagram typing. If you're interested in learning more about how your type leads you specifically, you can sign up for a free discovery call with me too. I will talk about how I coach and how coaching programs work, but that call is free and it's totally worth it. I'm telling you. Also, if you sign up for Discovery Call, I have these special little prizes. I'm proud because this is a journal that I made. I painted this, and then my son helped me make it into a journal. So this would be one of the prizes. And then if you prefer a more hardcore journal, this is a beautiful spiral bound metal journal. So that's if you get a Discovery Call or sign up for a Discovery Call. We have some questions that we've gotten on this topic if we don't have any. So how do you sign up for Discovery Call? You want to tell her that, Clara?
Yes. So the simplest way to do it will be through the email that we'll send out this afternoon. We'll have a link directly to it. But there's also a way to do it right away. And that's if you go to Calendly, calendly.com/Elle Zimmerman, and you'll be able to click to it right there.
One thing I want to say really quickly is, what was I going to say? I was going to say that the Enneagram is a process, it's a discovery, and so is clarity. So the key thing I want you to take away is that it's a journey. And I do encourage you to do a discovery call just to kind of like take a next step toward that. Yeah, what else? I can't remember what I was going to say, Clara.
I will share that I just put the link to schedule a clarity call with Elle in the chat, so you can easily click there to sign up for yours.
Okay. If there are no questions, I think what I'd like to do is end with a little round robin. We're going to do one word takeaway. So if you can unmute and just share one word that you took away from today, and then we'll call it a success. And I'm going to start with, and don't overthink it, just boom. First thing that comes to your mind. I'm going to start with Lisa.
Yay! Movement.
Molly?
Authenticity.
Jen?
Discovery.
Kara?
Feelings.
Clara?
Within.
And me? Grateful.
What about
So
Dave?
thank you. Oh, Dave, you're still here. What's your word, Dave?
Yes, discomfort.
Discomfort. And I'm still grateful. It's been a pleasure. Thank all of you for being here. Clara's going to send out an email with some information, the link, and also access to the replay. Please stay connected. It's a process, and I'm here to support.
Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this episode of She Made It. If you liked this live recording, keep an eye out for our upcoming She Made It live series. These will feature more inspiring conversations with Elle and a guest who has achieved amazing things, but we'll get to hear what her journey really looked like. Stay tuned.